somewhere?
Where are my boys? Mikey and Tyler, come on up here. Cruz is coming through. Great. Well, folks, I want to thank you all for joining us today. I want a couple of people I want to recognize, and then I'm going to speak. The senator told me he wanted me to speak for about a half an hour. So I said, that was fine, Senator. If you want me to speak longer, just let me know.
So it'll be a good short one.
Some of the folks that helped us with this event, Tom Brewer and Tom Shields, Don Sider and his wife Karen, Jim Morgan, and Bob Joyce. I'd like to round of applause for those folks. And some other folks who helped us get this event organized. CJ Ganji, where's CJ Ganji? And his brother Paul, who did whatever CJ told him to do. Chris Faniff, who helped down at the beverage table.
Yay, Chris!
Ted Tripp, who was here for 2 or 3 of our meetings to get this thing all organized. Yay! And of course, my 2 boys, Mikey and Tyler. Yay! And then my daughter, Bernadette. That's an old joke, Senator. There are some elected officials I'd like to recognize. Representative Leah Cole is here. And my partner in crime, Representative Mark Lombardo. The National State Committee woman, Chanel Prunier. Where's Chanel? Well, Senator Cruz, I want you to know that I have stood on this bond steps on countless occasions, and I have never, ever seen it look like this. I was starting to feel pretty good about myself, Senator. And then my wife reminded me that they were coming to see you. We've got a special guest that joined us today from the Lone Star State of Texas. So in Massachusetts, as you know, we are known for our Yankee Reserve. However, Texas is known and famous as a loud, boisterous, and a very big place. So let's make our fellow Texans, our friends from Texas, let's give them a big Andover, Massachusetts welcome. As you can see, Senator, you and Heidi are among friends in Massachusetts. Up here in Massachusetts, Texas is famous for a lot of things. Some of those things we don't necessarily like, the Dallas Cowboys. But we do like the oil and gas drilling that fuels America's economy. And that good old country and western music always sounds pretty darn good. And that deep sense of patriotism that beats in the heart of Texas. There is one thing, however, that has been Texas is most famous for, not just in Massachusetts, but all across our great nation, and that is the Alamo. It's such a part of our nation's legacy that every American feels pride and patriotism hearing the words, "Remember the Alamo." That's one of the stories of American history that binds us across generations and across the continent into one nation. A hardy band of a couple hundred volunteers held off the mighty Mexican army for 2 weeks until the Alamo mission fell. They gave their all for something greater than themselves. Unlike those fighters at the Alamo and our own Minutemen at Lexington Green and the Concord Bridge, most of us will never be asked to give the ultimate sacrifice for our country, which is why we owe so much to those who fought and died. And for those brave men and women who continue to fight for our liberties every single day. Senator, they fight for the red, white, and blue, and for all of the ideals that our flag represents. There is a very moving scene at the Alamo where the commander of the forces, William Travis, takes his sword and draws a line in the sand. And he tells the volunteers that they may stay on the far side, and peacefully leave the fort and save their own lives. Or they may cross the line and fight for something greater. One by one, they all cross the line and they promise to fight. Now, we are here today not faced with quite the same challenge, but we know this. In Washington, there is a line that separates those who want to go along to get along with those who want to stand and fight. There's a line between those who want to keep spending trillions and trillions of dollars on debt and those who want to stand and what?
Fight!
And there is a line between those who want to surrender our traditional values of life, family, liberty, and there are those who are willing to fight! We have with us today a man who has proven unequivocally that he will stand and fight. Like the men at Alamo, he will not surrender. He will not back down. Now he wants to fight for us as president. And he is going to tell us why it is worth the fight. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to introduce to you the great senator and Republican candidate for President of the United States, Senator Ted Cruz.
Well, Jim and Bernadette, let me say thank you and wow! Let me start by saying Tom Brady was framed. Now, I'm not willing to pander on much, but on that, Tom Brady was framed. And I will say this, I have it on good authority that Hillary Clinton did it. Why do you think she deleted her email? Let me say, Heidi and I are thrilled to be with y'all. She and I, both of us, have lived here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We both went to graduate school, here in the Commonwealth, and we are thrilled to be with so many patriots here in Massachusetts. You know, Jim, listening to your story about the Alamo, it reminded me of a former senator from Texas, a hero of mine, Senator Phil Gramm.
Yes.
Who was one of the original Reagan Democrats.
Yep.
He was an old blue dog Democrat. And when Reagan was president, Phil Gramm helped corral Democratic votes for Reagan's tax cut. And Phil has described to me how he would sit with Democratic congressmen and he'd say, look, this is the right thing to do. And he'd tell that same story, Jim. He'd say, this is when William Barrett Travis drew a line in the sand. Every man there had to decide, do you step across the line or do you stay cowardly where you were to begin? And Phil said a number of those Democratic congressmen responded to him and they said, Phil, everyone who stepped across that line died. And Phil's response is, yes, that's true. And you know what? Everyone who didn't step across that line, they died too. And nobody remembers their names. This is something here in New England you all understand. Our country is in crisis. What's happening right now, this is not a typical election. What we're doing doesn't make any sense. In 6 years, we've seen the national debt go from $10 trillion to $18 trillion. We're bankrupting our kids and grandkids. We've seen the federal government go from an institution that protects the Bill of Rights and our constitutional rights to a government that violates the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens. And under the Obama-Clinton foreign policy, we've seen America recede from the world. And the world right now is literally on fire. But let me tell you, if you remember nothing that I say tonight, well, then you probably hit the bar a little too hard. But if you remember just one thing that I say here today, let it be this: that I'm powerfully, profoundly, deeply optimistic. As bad as things are, people are waking up. They are waking up in Massachusetts, they are waking up in New Hampshire, they are waking up all across this great nation. Let me tell you, who would have predicted 500 people in Andover, Massachusetts? The central issue in this next election in 2016 is going to be reigniting the promise of America. Getting back to that fundamental ideal that our kids would have a better life than we did and their kids would have a better life than they did. How do we do that? 3 simple things. Number 1, we bring back jobs and growth and opportunity. Look, y'all understand cause and effect. Every time we pursue out-of-control spending and taxes and regulation, the result is misery and stagnation and malaise. And every time we pursue tax reform and regulatory reform, the result has been incredible economic growth. We saw that in the 1920s. We saw that in the 1960s. We saw that in the 1980s. And by the way, I will point out in the 1960s, one of the most powerful, eloquent defenders of tax cuts was John F. Kennedy. As JFK said, some men see things as they are. And ask why. I see things that never were. And ask why not. JFK would be a Republican today. There is no room for John F. Kennedys in the modern Democratic Party. How do we bring back jobs and growth? Number one, tax reform. We spend about $500 billion a year on tax compliance. The best tax reform, we should adopt a simple flat tax. So that every American can fill out his or her taxes on a postcard. And when we do that, we should abolish the IRS. There are about 90,000 employees at the IRS. We should padlock that building. Take all 90,000 and put them on our southern border. Now, to our friends, the Democratic trackers who've joined us, that was somewhat tongue-in-cheek. But think about it for a second. Imagine you traveled thousands of miles in the blazing sun. You're swimming the Rio Grande. The first thing you see is 90,000 IRS agents. You turn around and go home too. The second key to economic growth is regulatory reform. Regulators from Washington, the alphabet soup, have descended on small businesses, strangling and crushing small businesses and making it impossible to create jobs. And I was out in West Texas, and I asked a simple question. What's the difference between regulators and locusts? Well, the thing is, you can't use pesticide on the regulators. And this old Texas farmer leaned back. He said, "Want to bet?" And the simplest and most important regulatory reform. We need to repeal every word of Obamacare. We need health care reform that makes health insurance personal, portable, and affordable, and keeps government from getting between you and your doctor. The second key to reigniting the promise of America is we need to defend our constitutional rights. All of them. Yes. The First Amendment, our free speech, our religious liberty, especially our religious liberty. You know, last year, following the Hobby Lobby decision, Senate Democrats introduced a constitutional amendment to gut the Federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act. When it passed 20 years ago, it passed the Senate 97-3 with bipartisan support. I gave a speech on the Senate floor saying, how could you be acting against Christian companies? How could you be acting against the Little Sisters of the Poor, a Catholic charity that's taken vows of poverty that the Obama administration is litigating against? Trying to force the Little Sisters of the Poor to pay for abortion-inducing drugs for others. Now let me suggest a real simple rule of thumb. if you're litigating against nuns, you've probably done something wrong. But I gave a speech on the Senate floor in defense of religious liberty. Next to me was a giant poster of JFK. My dad turned on C-SPAN, scared the living daylights out of him. He said, "My goodness, my son's gone native." But JFK said, "I will not stand with someone who will not stand with religious liberty." I said, "Where are the Democrats? Is there even one Democrat who will stand for civil liberties?" When it came time to a vote, do you know how many Democrats voted to uphold our religious liberties? Zero.
Whoa.
We need to defend the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. Vice President Joe Biden. Bernadette, you know the nice thing? You don't need a punchline. I promise you it works. Next time you're at a party, just walk up to somebody, say Vice President Joe Biden, and just close your mouth. I promise you, they will crack up laughing. But Biden says, if anyone attacks your home, just go outside with a double-barreled shotgun and fire both barrels in the air. Now that is very, very good advice. If it so happens you're being attacked by a flock of geese. We need to defend the Fourth and Fifth Amendments, our rights to privacy. How many of y'all have your cell phones? Let me ask you, please leave your cell phones on. I want to make sure President Obama hears every word we say tonight. We need to defend the 10th Amendment. Or as President Obama calls it, the what? The fundamental protection that says the powers not given to the federal government are reserved to the states and to the people. That means their core areas the federal government has no business sticking its nose, and chief among them is education, and we need to repeal every word of Common Core. Education is too important for it to be governed by unelected bureaucrats in Washington. It needs to be at the state level, or even better, at the local level, where parents have direct influence and control. And the third key to reigniting the promise of America is we need to restore America's leadership in the world.
Oh, yeah.
For 6 years, we have seen the Obama-Clinton foreign policy of leading from behind. Our friends and allies no longer trust us, and our enemies don't fear us. Instead of a president who boycotts Prime Minister Netanyahu, imagine America standing unapologetically with the nation of Israel. Imagine a commander-in-chief who stands up and says, "We will defeat radical Islamic terrorism." And we will call it by its name. Imagine a president who says, under no circumstances will the nation of Iran, led by theocratic zealots who chant death to America, under no circumstances will they be allowed to acquire nuclear weapons. I suspect many of y'all are thinking, all of this makes sense. I agree with this. But can it happen? How do we make it happen? Are we too far gone? Can we turn our country around?
Vote for Ted Cruz.
Well, let me tell you, the book of Ecclesiastes tells us there's nothing new under the sun. I think where we are today is very, very much like the late 1970s. I think the parallels between Barack Obama and Jimmy Carter are uncanny.
It's worse.
Same failed economic policies, same misery, stagnation, and malaise, same feckless and naive foreign policy. In fact, the exact same countries, Russia and Iran, openly laughing at and mocking the President of the United States.
What foreign policy?
You know, the one person in America thrilled with the job Barack Obama's doing is Jimmy Carter. Now, why does that analogy give me so much hope and optimism? Because we know how the story ended. As a result, millions of Americans across this country began rising up, a grassroots movement that became the Reagan Revolution. And it didn't come from Washington. Washington despised Ronald Reagan. By the way, if you see a candidate who Washington embraces, run and hide. It came from the American people. It swept up like a tsunami. It turned this country around from stagnation to booming prosperity, from our hostages in Iran to their being released the day Reagan was sworn into office. I am optimistic, I am hopeful because of each of you. What happened in 1980 is happening all over again. All across this country, millions of men and women, people have never been involved in politics before. Let me ask you, how many people here have not been actively involved in politics before? Look around at the hands. This is important and this is powerful. This was the Reagan Revolution. People that were going to church, that were going to work, that were raising their kids, that looked up and said, what on earth is happening to our country? The same thing is happening again. 58 years ago, my father fled Cuba. He had been in prison. He had been tortured in Cuba. They beat him almost to death as a teenager. When he came to America, he was 18. He couldn't speak English. He had $100 sewn into his underwear. Which actually, I don't advise carrying money in your underwear. His first job was washing dishes, making 50 cents an hour. He worked 7 days a week. He paid his way through school. He went on to get a job to start a small business. Today, he's a pastor based out of Dallas. My dad's been my hero my whole life. But you know what I find most incredible about his story? How commonplace it is. Every single person here, we got a story just like that in our backgrounds. Some of us, it's us. Others, it's our parents. Others, it's our great-great-great-grandparents. But what ties Americans together is we are all the children of those who risked everything for freedom. That's the fundamental DNA of what it means to be an American, to value liberty and opportunity above all else. And I'll tell you what my dad said to me over and over again when I was a kid. He said, when we faced oppression in Cuba, I had a place to flee to. If we lose our freedom here, where do we go?
That's right. Where do we go?
That's why the men and women are gathered here, because we will not go quietly into the night. So I'm here to ask for your support for us to stand together to unify a grassroots movement to take power out of Washington and back to we the people, to get back to liberty and back to the Constitution.
So folks, now you see why we have all of these people here today. Give a big round of applause to the senator. Reagan Bush, 84. So folks, I have real good news though about tonight and the future. Senator Cruz has made some serious promises to Bernadette and I in order for this event to take place. You know, I know I'm not one of the Washington politicians, but I certainly know enough to sit down with the senator and demand a few things in return. And the senator has made one promise that we're going to hold him to, is he's going to come back again when he's president of the United States. So the senator is going to stay around for a while, say hello to people, more pictures, you know. And the other thing that I want to let everyone know is that in order for us to win at the national level, just as it is at the local level, our candidates need help. So anything that you can do to help Senator Cruz in this campaign, however that is, helping him up in New Hampshire, helping him making telephone calls, making donations for the Cruz for President campaign. As he just pointed out, we're going to take back this country, but the senator needs your help to do it. Amen. So thank you all very much for doing that.
And let me just briefly amplify on that, thanking y'all for being here. But also I want to make something very, very clear. I can't win this race. Heidi and I can't win this race. But you can win this race. So I want to ask each of you to do two things. Number one, I want to ask each of you to go and vote for me 10 times. Now look, we're not Democrats. I'm not asking for voter fraud. But let me tell you how you can do it. Every one of you can show up and vote. And you can get on the phone and get 9 of your friends that wouldn't have come out otherwise and ask them to show up and do the same thing. Now everyone here has friends in New Hampshire. New Hampshire, as you know, is the first primary in the nation. It is an incredibly important state. Every friend you can reach out to, every family member, your sister lives in New Hampshire, you can call her. Every person you get to show up and vote in New Hampshire makes a huge, huge difference in this primary.
Give me liberty or give me death.
But let me tell you also, it's not just New Hampshire. Massachusetts now has its primary at the beginning of March. Right after South Carolina, Massachusetts is going to be an early Republican primary. The Massachusetts Republican primary could make a real difference if every person here got 10 people to vote. The men and women here could make a real difference in the Republican primary. And then the second component. You know, when we launched the campaign on March 23rd, the New York Times said, Cruz cannot win.
That's right.
Because the Washington elites despise him.
Right.
I kind of thought that was the whole point. But the Times explained the reason we couldn't win. Because the Washington elites control all the money. So yes, there may be grassroots support, but at the end of the day, all the lobbyist money will go to other candidates, so you can't win. Well, in the first week of our campaign, we set a goal of raising $1 million, which I thought was an audacious goal. Sorry to tell you, we failed in that goal. We didn't raise $1 million in a week. We raised $1 million in one day.
Senator, I have to tell you a story. So your campaign staff called us about 10 days ago and they said, Representative, can you get us 50 people to see the senator? We did a little better, Senator.
A lot better. And it is because of the men and women here. By the end of the week, we raised over $4.3 million, the most in modern times. 51,000 contributions. From all 50 states, people went to tedcruz.org. 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 95% of the contributions were $100 or less. That is the power and the support of we the people. And if each of you votes 10 times and goes to tedcruz.org and supports us with whatever you're able, together we're building a grassroots army.
Yes.
That's how we turn the country around. Thank you. God